Hello Internet, I am the Hero of Julios, back again with another video. This time I decided to do the continuation of the Straw Hat Pirates in Dungeons & Dragons. This time I'm going to go with the swordsman of the Straw Hat Pirates, Roronoa Zoro. I took a little bit to think about what I was going to do for this one in particular, but seeing as the Luffy video was well received, I figured I should, continue down the list. Probably after this one I'm going to take a look into how to do Nami. I will say this one was a little bit easier than I thought it was going to be, but it was harder than Luffy. It was definitely harder to pinpoint what would actually make it work. But without further ado, I should probably actually get into it. So to start this off, we're going to need the Player's Handbook and Volo's Guide to Monsters. Fortunately, we do not need Xanathar's Guide. Given the stuff that I saw inside, I felt that we could do everything in this with the Player's Handbook. We only need Volo's Guide to Monsters for a specific race inside of the book. For the sake of Zoro's three-sword style to keep it intact, I decided to go with the lizard folk as the race of our choice. So the reason we're going with the lizard folk is so that we can have a bite attack in the place of our third sword. Without some kind of homebrew or a very generous dungeon master, there's no way to properly hold three swords in your hands and mouth respectively. So the bite attack from the lizard folk is going to be the closest we have. However, in addition to the lizard folk's bite attack, we also have natural armor, which helps to serve as kind of a allusion to Zoro's armament hockey, because it gains us an extra bonus when we're not wearing any armor. Now, once I get into the classes and stuff, it'll make more sense why this may or may not be super important. In addition to our bite and natural armor, we also get hold breath. While this isn't super relevant to Zoro, it's worth noting that we have seen Zoro win in underwater encounters that a normal person wouldn't have done so well in, kind of proving that Zoro can hold his breath for a decent amount of time in a fight. I think that's enough to go off of this, so lizard folk is the race of choice. For the rest of this, we're just going to be using the Player's Handbook, and we're going to be picking the soldier background. That way we can get our intimidation and our athletics proficiencies. I would say that, much like how I was saying with Luffy in the last video, a custom background is totally within the rules. You just need to sit down with your DM and see what, is properly appropriate for what you want to pick. But I feel athletics and intimidation are both very significant things for Zoro. Plus, having been a bounty hunter, he technically does have a type of rank that other people know him by. So I feel like that's a good way to give Zoro kind of a backstory in your Dungeons & Dragons campaign. For our ability scores, we are going to go with the standard array once again. We'll be starting with our strength. We'll be giving it the 15, dexterity 12, constitution 13, intelligence 10, wisdom 8, and charisma 14. Now the reason I picked 14 to go to the charisma stat is because Zoro is a very intimidating person, and intimidation does rely heavily on the charisma stat. You could argue that constitution or dexterity could also get the 14, but I feel like when you think of Zoro, you think of how strong he is and how afraid his opponents typically are of him. Now the 13 is where I put the constitution, strictly because Zoro is a very heavy drinker, and dexterity was just the next logical stat. The reason wisdom is his dump stat is, for the most obvious, Zoro gets lost incredibly easily. So to have a -1 to your survival skill, which is typically what DMs will have you roll for your, checking around or getting lost, that kind of thing. I believe intelligence is where your nature stat is. So if your DM makes you roll nature to not get lost in, places such as woods and stuff, you'll still have a +0. The pluses that we get from the lizard folk will boost our constitution from 13 to 15, and our wisdom will go up 1 to a 9. that's not too terribly important because that will not change the -1 we get to our wisdom related rolls. Now that we have race and background out of the way, let's go right into our first stats, fighter. So for our first level, we're going to pick the 2-weapon fighting style. The reason for that is based on Zoro's 2-sword style. There are some scenarios throughout the story where Zoro has found himself only using 2 of his swords. This is fairly believable. In addition, at level 1, we also get our second wind ability, which is just a quick way to heal yourself for a fighter. However, this fits greatly for Zoro because Zoro has a tendency to ignore his wounds. While that's not exactly a heal, the fact that he's ignoring his wounds and continuing forward is kind of like giving himself a couple extra HP, if you want to look at it that way. At level 2, we get Action Surge. And the reason we're picking that is because, just like Luffy, Zoro has a tendency of going beyond his physical limits when it comes to a fight. Because of this, Action Surge gives you another action on your turn. As we find out later on in our levels for fighter, more on that later, there are extra attacks that you can gain, which again, much like with Luffy and his many blows of Gum Gum Gatling, we have Zoro and his many slashes that he does when he's fighting an enemy. For the third level of fighter, we are going to be choosing the Champion Fighter branch. And the reason for that is for the improved critical. What this ability does is change your critical strike from being on a 20 to a 19 and a 20. This is super helpful because despite what I said about Zoro landing many blows, Zoro tends to end his fights in a single strike rather than a rapid succession of hits. Because of this, the 19 makes him twice as likely to critically hit than any other class. For level 4 of fighter, we're going to be choosing the Dual Wielder feat. The reason we're picking this is because we'll gain 1 bonus to our armor class when we're holding 2 weapons. We'll be able to wield 2 weapons even if they aren't light weapons. And as we know, Zoro's swords hold a lot of weight to them. And finally, we can draw 2 weapons at once instead of 1. This will allow us to use a free action to pull out both of our swords and swing them forth. Our next 4 levels are going to be in Paladin, which, while Zoro has stated that he does not pray to a god, we can say that Paladins have a lot of abilities similar to things Zoro is capable of. For example, at the first level of Paladin, this would be our 5th level as a character, we gain Divine Sense, which is very similar to Observation Haki, though at a very low level. The ability allows us to sense very specific targets, undead, celestial, and fiend. Zoro, of the 2 Haki types, has chosen to focus more on his armament Haki than his observation Haki, so it's very good that this ability kind of has a limited version of observation Haki. The second ability we get as a paladin at level 1 is Lay on Hands, which again, much as I said earlier, Zoro has a tendency of just flat out ignoring his wounds. While you as a player could use Lay on Hands on another character, this is more to use on yourself. A way to keep Zoro fighting throughout the rest of combat. At level 6, we're going to be continuing down the Paladin path. The reason for that is we're going to be getting our spellcasting ability. Now, Zoro is a very melee fighter, and Paladins are able to use ranged spells. However, despite the fact that a Paladin is able to swap between their spells, like a cleric and a druid, I would strongly recommend just sticking to the spells that I'm going to be listing here, so that you can stay within the Zoro flavor. If we did take spells, we would take the following at our charisma modifier plus half of our paladin level, which will be 4 in this case. The spells that fit Zoro best, in my opinion, are Compelled Duel, which after a wisdom saving throw will force your opponent into one-on-one fights. Divine Favor, which adds 1 extra d4 damage on every hit for the next minute. Searing Smite, which allows your next attack to deal an extra 1d6 fire damage and set the target aflame. The reason for this is, as we've seen during the Fishman Island combat, that Zoro does tend to leave lasting effects when he strikes his opponents. Finally, Thunderous Smite, which deals an additional 2d6 damage, makes an audible boom for 300 feet, and pushes your foes back 10 feet away if they fail their strength save, which, if you're going to be doing this the way that I'm listing, is going to be very hard for them to beat, because by the end of this, Zoro is going to be very strong. Now, the main reason we're picking the second level into Paladin is so that we can gain the Divine Smite ability. What this does is allows us to exchange our spell slots for extra damage when we land an attack. With this ability, Zoro will be able to do an extra 2d8 damage when landing an attack. In addition to the extra 2d8, if you land a critical hit thanks to that 19 or 20 from our fighter levels, these 2d8s will also be doubled into 4d8s, if your DM is ruling things the way that I would. Because you are able to include these dice when you have successfully landed a hit. It is not a whether you hit, it's not a like you announce it, then you strike. It's you strike, then you announce that you're using these extra dice. At level 7, we'll be taking our third level of Paladin, in which we will get Divine Health, which makes us immune to diseases. Let's be honest, have we ever seen Zoro get a cold? We gain 1 use of Channel Divinity, which we will be able to use after a short or long rest, and as our third level of Paladin, we will be choosing an oath. This one we'll be choosing is Oath of Vengeance. The reason for that is because of the strong intimidation factor that comes from it. When you take this oath at level 3, you can choose between using 2 of these different channel divinities. You can choose Abjure Enemy, which allows you to force a creature to make a wisdom saving throw. On a failure, their speed is reduced to 0, and if they succeed, their speed is reduced by half. The main reason for that is so that when Zoro's in a fight, especially if against an opponent weaker than him, willpower-wise, you can force that opponent to stay in place while you come down to finish them. Your other option is the Vow of Enmity. You channel your divinity to gain advantage on a creature for 1 minute. Again, going back to our compelled duel and challenging one-on-one fights, this is a great way to ensure that you definitely get that critical hit you're searching for, finish the fight, and go back to joining your friends. For our 4th and final Paladin level, we're going to be taking the Alert feat. I took a little bit to think about this, but in most scenarios where Zoro should have been caught off guard, he hasn't been. 2 great examples are when the Frankie family tried to sneak up on him, and way back during the Whiskey Peak arc when all the members of Baroque Works tried to capture the Straw Hats, Zoro was the only one that wasn't drunk or asleep. For our next 4 levels, we're going to be going back into the Barbarian, because much like Luffy, Zoro is a very strong upfront melee fighter. Because of this, we're going to be starting with Barbarian level 1, taking the Rage so that we can do extra damage, as well as resisting physical damage when we're getting into a fight. At level 2 of Barbarian, we're going to be getting Reckless Attack, which is really good for Zoro because Zoro actually uses his 2 swords. While swinging them around, he'll gain advantage on his attacks. However, enemies will gain advantage to attack him. There have been occasions where Zoro has left himself open to attacks against particularly strong opponents, but with the amount of HP we'll be gaining in these Barbarian levels, Zoro should be able to tank that kind of damage. In addition to level 2 of Barbarian, Zoro gains the Danger Sense, which, like I was saying with Alert, really comes into play when you think about it, that Zoro has a tendency of not getting caught out of combat kind of scenarios. For our 3rd level of Barbarian, you guessed it, we're going to be using the Bear Totem again. And the reason for that is strictly so that we can gain that extra defense from other types of magical attacks, aside from Psychic. For our 4th and final level of Barbarian, we'll be taking an ability score improvement to improve our strength. The only real reason I can give is Zoro is strong. I'm going to be saying that a lot for the rest of this video, so that's just a heads up for those of you watching. So, for the rest of our levels, we're going to be dipping back into Fighter. Like I said, Zoro was a little harder to come up with, but once I figured it out, I was able to just slide into the rest of these levels. For level 13, we're going to be getting the fighter's extra attack. This will allow Zoro to deal more damage through hitting more times. Couple this with the stuff that Zoro gained during his Paladin levels, we should be able to defeat our opponent within the first or second turn of combat. For our next level, we'll be taking ability score improvement in strength, because again, Zoro is strong. After that, for our 15th level, we will gain the fighter's ability Remarkable Athlete. While Zoro specializes in strong physical attacks, we also have the bonus of dexterity and constitution for things that we are not normally proficient in. This is strictly because through all the rigorous training of his childhood, Zoro is physically capable of taking on pretty much any task thrown at him. For our next level in Fighter, we gain another ability score improvement. Can you guess what I'm going to say? That's right, we're going to be taking it in Strength and Constitution. Mostly because if we took 2 in Strength, we'd hit 21, which is not allowed. So we might as well just throw that point into our Constitution to round it out. For level 17 and our 9th level in Fighter, we're going to gain the Indomitable feature, which is a great ability for fighters to, when failing a saving throw, choosing to roll again. It's a great opportunity to turn those moments of doubt or suffering into a moment of triumph, which Zoro has been shown to do, especially during Thriller Bark. At our 10th level of Fighter, 18th total, we're going to gain a second fighting style. For this, I decided to go with the Great Weapon Fighting, for the scenarios where Zoro finds himself with 1 sword instead of 2. We've seen Zoro pull off some pretty amazing attacks no matter how many swords he's using, so I feel like this fighting style is a better choice than something like Defender or Duelist. After that, at our 11th fighter level, we're going to gain another extra attack, which gives Zoro another strike and another chance to finish off his opponent quickly. And then finally, we're going to finish up our levels with the level 20, and we are going to get another ability score improvement as a fighter. This time, I would like us to take the Tough feat. This way Zoro gains an extra 40 HP. By this point, your stats should look something like this. And there you have it. You got Roronoa Zoro, at least the best that I could do. Again, just like the Luffy video, this is 100% opinionated, but I would like to hear any ideas in the comments. Maybe your thoughts about what I should go in the direction of for Nami, because that's the one I'm going to be doing next. And if you have any ideas for other One Piece characters once I finish the Straw Hat crew, I actually kind of like this exercise, and I think it's a lot of fun to try and bring one thing that I love and throw it into another thing that I love. You know, putting these things together. With that, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. This is the Hero of Julios, Xing out.